I've played a little bit of everything at different times. Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder. Just different aspects that are kind of connected to the world of D&D, or how I kind of feel like offspurts to kind of be more like community driven in some ways. And just because it's like, if the rules get too complex, just like in designs, like if they get too complex, people find their own ways to do things, simplify things down. And I actually found, like, this is kind of something interesting that's kind of in my world of, tabletop gaming and stuff. I found that, there's the rules, there's how to do stuff, but like, I found I was a more effective DM when I didn't worry so much about the rules.
It's time for an adventure in the worlds of user experience and game design. On Season 3 of the Design Thinking Games podcast, join old school UXers and aspiring game designers Michael Schofield, Tim Broadwater, and an array of quirky characters from pixelated heroes to mischievous NPCs in search of the ultimate player experience. Design thinking is a process that is applied to different types of games in this podcast. If you're wondering whether your favorite games have already come up, you can listen through the backlog at designthinkinggames.com. Now, Rapid Protobot, fire the design thinking laser.
You have a very, very extensive background in UX. And as we are a gaming and UX podcast, your resume reads like Intel, AWS, Facebook, General Assembly, like crazy. Like, so the question, I guess, is, and you've probably answered this 100 times on podcasts before, is how, the backstory, how did you get into UX? Like, what's your elevator pitch, your backstory?
I started way back when the web was just becoming a thing. My first internet connection definitely was like dialing up with a modem, right? So when I got into design, I was doing web design before there were web designers. Like, there wasn't a title, there wasn't a role. It was just kind of this ancillary thing that was mostly used by schools, libraries, universities, that kind of stuff, and the government. So when I got into UX and when I got into design was just a natural progression for what I was doing. The one thing I think, like, if I was to look at what was like that tipping point, what was that, moment where I kind of transitioned, because I was doing web, and again, there was no design, no web designers even really. There was like Webmaster, which like ran the website, but nobody, like, there wasn't a role for this. I was doing web development, essentially. I was doing front-end web development, pre-CSS generation. And I was working at an agency.
Wild.
And we were creating like these things at the time were like considered like mind-boggling, amazing, like, everything from like interactive ads to like websites that had, 5,000 pages on them or something like that, and I'm talking like static pages. Nothing was generated from a database at the time. And, the first ever e-commerce sites, that kind of stuff. While I was doing this, I was involved in the community, the web design community. There were like web design forum. There's a bunch of online sort of chats and lists and things. And I came across Christina Wookie. Me and her just had been friends kind of ever since. And I remember talking to her one day when I was at this job, and she was like, "Hey Nick, so I know you like have this like front-end developer or web developer title. What exactly do you do?" Because something I was saying in the forum must have like triggered some interest. And I talked about like how I was creating sitemaps for these massive sites and figuring out how to organize all this stuff to make it more digestible. At the time, I was working for on a site for a company called Sequent, which later became part of IBM, the NUMA server kind of category. And so these are like extensive sites with lots of content for all the products and all this kind of stuff run on flat files. When she talked to me about this stuff, she's like, okay, so like, do you figure out flows, you figure out organization, what about like naming, labeling, navigation? Like, yeah, absolutely. As a web developer, I have to create all that stuff. Again, because UX wasn't a thing, information architecture wasn't a thing. Well, it was, I just didn't know about it at the time. So this was after the kind of genesis of information architecture in terms of the articles that were written about it. And Christina says, you should check out the Polar Bear book. And I'm kind of like smiling and nodding. And I'm like, what's the Polar Bear book? Because I picked up O'Reilly books, but I never referred to them as like, the koala book, right? And so it kind of intrigued me. And she's like, oh yeah, no, it's just an O'Reilly book. It just has a polar bear. Just go to the store, look for the Polar Bear book, on the shelf. And I went to Pal's Books, found the book on the shelf, and I said, okay, here's this book called Information Architecture. And I think it was like, at the title was originally like for the World Wide Web or something like that. It was the first generation, first edition, which I probably have over on my shelf somewhere. But I started reading through it. I'm like, wow, this is actually like a resource for the stuff I've been doing in addition to like writing HTML all day. And from there, I was kind of hooked. I was like, okay, I need to learn more about information architecture. And I started like connecting into all these folks in the industry. Just like Peter Morville, Lou Rosenfeld, just a number of folks, including Christina, who authored at the time, I think she authored there's an information architecture book she wrote at the time, the Blueprints for the Web. So that said, I dived deep into it and got into it to the point where I was doing both sort of the web standards, web development kind of stuff. CSS was starting to become a big thing. And, information architecture was kind of getting its footing. After not too long, then interaction design came up. And then there was sort of this moment where everybody sort of, if you can imagine, everybody's standing in a room kind of going, okay, we're splitting into two factions because we got too big. Is that what's happening here? And everybody wanted to go either and be this different thing, or, there's this concept of big IA and little IA going around at the time too. And eventually the idea of UX became a thing where we said, you know what, all this interaction design, all this information architecture, these are sort of aspects of this thing called user experience. And that's where really the first user experience designers kind of got their title. Because it was sort of this kind of grouping title. And it quickly got misused and grew into the mess we have today where like titles mean almost nothing. And, you could have people called UX designer by title doing product design and product designers doing UX design and, everywhere in between.
This is our
UI
greatest
designers.
pet peeve.
Yeah, right. So we're not going to go down that debate because that's like whatever you want to call that. It was an endless debate. It just never stops. But that's how I got into it. And that's where I started doing more of that sort of stuff. There was kind of another milestone in my career where I was doing work with Kelly Goto and her organization, Goto Media. And we were working on things like, I was doing like usability evaluations on the FDIC website. I was doing, web design and web development for different, projects of hers that she needed just extra support on, or information architecture on some stuff. And I just happened to be, I think I was like at Web 2000, or I don't remember what, it was like a conference downtown in San Francisco. And I got to meet up with her for dinner and chat. And we were talking and she's like, Nick, like, I know I've hired you for a bunch of stuff. I know I hired you for this and that and usability and information architecture, but I don't really know what it is you actually do, and I remember, at the time, because I was in web development, I got to know Molly Holschlag, and that's what got me down, I think, to San Francisco for the, I want to say again, it's Web 2000 conference. And I asked Molly, because she's my mentor pretty much at this point. And I go, Molly, this is what Kelly said to me. how do you interpret that? And she's like, oh, I think she's saying you need to have a mantra. And I'm like, what the hell's a mantra? So, a quick search, and I'm like, okay, I get this like idea that this is kind of like my ethos, my embodiment of like what I want to do for my career. How do I want to talk about myself? How do I frame what it is I do? And that's what really brought me closer into looking at myself as a UX professional, as I titled myself eventually. So that's a long answer for, how did I get into this? But, that's going back 25 years plus. So.
No, thank you for speaking that, because there's a lot I think that resonates with probably both Mike and I about definitely like the UX job factioning that's happening right now, to where if you're a UXer who writes code, you're not a UXer, or we can't even give you UX developer status, or like what. And I definitely remember Flash. Oh my God. I remember when everything interaction design was just like popping. And
wait, Future Splash, right?
Yeah. I tell people when I see some of the people I work with today, it's like, oh yeah, I've been using Photoshop since 4. And they're just like mind blown. It's like mind blown.
They had version numbers for this thing. Well, that's kind of interesting, because I've heard people do that sort of thing where it's like, oh, you're not in this field, or you're not really practicing this unless you're doing this. And I'm even guilty of saying those kinds of things. If you go back in the recesses of my Twitter, you'll probably see stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I've learned over time and kind of grew a little bit more maturity around it, and realized that, like, especially as a mentor and coach, like, I have a lot of clients are like, hey, this person's telling me I'm not this because I'm not doing that, or, whatever. Or even like when they interview, they don't get the job and they get told things. I'll say this to the listeners is like, don't ever let anybody tell you what you can and can't do for your career. You could do anything. Right?
Totally.
You could redefine the role if you need to. You can extend it to areas it never went into. This is how we get experts in different things. Like, this is how we have accessibility experts. This is how we have people who are voice speech experts in the field of UX doing some kind of design connected to that. So, don't ever let things like that dissuade you from getting into the field, much less continuing a career and interest that you have that might marry multiple things together.
Here. I don't even know how to better say that. I think it's just everything by default is institutionally, I think, is just siloed, by default. And so I feel like in many ways UXers just have to have sledgehammers with them all the time to break down walls, and just be able to talk to the people on the other side of the walls and say, like, listen, I mean, a lot of what I find my experience is always UX is more conversation, and just kind of like, can we talk about this? Can we think through this? Can we understand it from a different perspective?
I like how there was a few caveats in there that just kind of said, like, remember how old this is, right? I think I'm like the UX generation after you. So like my first like AngelFire and GeoCities website still had like CSS1 in there, right? And I followed a fairly similar like path. But like everything you're talking about just feels like nostalgic to me. I was like, the days when I had passion, right? It's like no one born after 2000 knows like that like the hassle of like uploading like 700 files over like FTP, like it's like this kind of like old like cPanel like version 1 or something like that. So there were some like great moments there too. Like, sorry, I'm just like I'll shut up, but like CSS Zen Garden, like the first one, like there was some like really cool stuff that like really emerged that's worth revisiting in kind of like this Back to the Future style thing.
Can you hear me? Good to have you back with us. I hope you don't mind that I am recording for investigative notes. It's a wax cylinder, the only thing we've found that can pick up the voices of people in your condition. My name is Owen von Sid. I am a reclaimer. Do you know what that means? No? Well, I am sorry to inform you that you didn't make it. Please try to remain calm. The worst is over. Nothing can hurt you, not ever again. But the thing that did this to you, it is still out there. That is what we do. I wake unfortunate souls, such as yourself, hear their stories, then my associates and I see to it that whoever or whatever did this to you is dealt with. Now, let's begin. When you are ready, tell me, how did you die?
Ghost Wax is an anthology horror podcast from Far and Tall Tales Productions. New episodes releasing weekly. Look for us wherever you get your podcasts.
How did you get into gaming?
Gosh, I mean, that is going back a ways. The Red Box, I want to say, the original D&D first edition Red Box was probably the first time I started playing D&D. I was over at a friend's house and, well, actually, no, like that was maybe the second time. The first time, okay, going back. The first time it was the Red Box, but my brother and one of his friends were over and they were going to play D&D and I didn't know what it was. And I was interested because, I'd played all kinds of board games with the family and whatever, Uno, Monopoly, whatever. I remember like there was sort of this resistance, like, oh, I don't know if it's for you or whatever. And I'm like, oh, like, tell me about it. And like, what is it? And then I finally convinced them to let me play. And I lasted about 2 whole minutes before I killed myself by going through a door where it sucked me into another dimension. And there was like a demon there or something. I don't remember exactly, but like I died real fast.
Sorry. It's exactly what you see on YouTube skits,
I mean, I was the player like, oh, there's a little baby dragon. I'm going to make friends with it, right? I had no idea what I was doing. So there was a lot of kind of interestingness about the game that intrigued me. And then again, like I went to my friend's house, they had the Red Box and I was like, oh, I think I played that once. And they had the actual, if you could remember the first, it's not even a box set. It was a white booklet that was like introducing the original D&D because I think the Red Box might have been advanced or something like that. I can't remember now. But I remember there was 2 different game systems. I didn't really understand that these were like different systems fundamentally in terms of how they operated. But we ended up playing D&D. And I think my friend was DMing or his brother was or something like that. And, had a fun time, had like little figurines and stuff. The cool, crazy dice that you didn't see before. Like it was like, oh, what the heck, a 4-sided dice? How does that work?
Wow.
So, just like all this kind of interestingness about it. And, when I got into it, I kind of realized like it's a lot about storytelling. It's a lot about theater of the mind. It's a lot about kind of trying to visualize how something might be. And it relies on, the sort of, I'll call him the referee, the DM, the game master, GM, and they have to depict the scene. In order for the game to be really successful so that characters can kind of understand how to interact and you control this other character. So, if you remember, I don't know if maybe I'm also dating myself here, but the Clash of the Titans, the original.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
The gods kind of placing the figure in it's like that's D&D like that. Like that's kind of how I felt like when we had the figurines and we're moving them around on a hand-drawn map, on a piece of paper or whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, we're controlling this other entity kind of thing, and a lot back then, a lot of the material was very, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I know like a lot of people thought it was very culty or whatever, or, anti-religion and all this stuff, I didn't really see it that way because there was like, not just demons, there was angels, there was dragons, there were, benign creatures and there were, creatures that would go on defense as soon as you saw them, kind of thing. So it was kind of a whole world. And I do remember, picking up like the Lord of the Rings books, reading those and getting intrigued by this and kind of seeing the kind of overlap between the two worlds of the, D&D game world and this book, which really fostered that kind of fantasy fiction world, and that's how I started. I started in D&D.
So your family played commercial like board games, or you played board games with your family and friends that were out, but then you got exposed to Dungeons and Dragons. And I know the reference of Clash of the Titans. Do you, I'm assuming you know of Mazes and Monsters, right?
Yeah.
So we actually, on episode, I think season 1, we actually talked about like the religious fervor and the stuff behind, or the original perception of like Dungeons and Dragons or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, right? And I think Stranger Things, the TV show, is even touching on it on Netflix, because it's, I think in their last season, they have this D&D club at their high school. And so I kind of remember that it was like, is this, are we allowed to do this? We're making up the rules. We're writing the rules and playing it. Is this even a game? And that's, I think, what broke people's minds about it.
Yeah. I mean, that was absolutely me.
Oh yeah. How much of it, like what, like it seems to me that like one of the things that was maybe like paradigm shifting then was that I can't really think of other games other than like D&D, like at the time, that was like co-creative, right? Like you were participating in the game. It's like, yeah, you were playing or whatever, but you were also like an integral part of how that game was designing around you too. Mind-blowing stuff.
5th edition now is a format, right? There's a lot of podcasts, play podcasts. There's Critical Role, Dungeons and Daddies, The Real Housewives of D&D. You can go out to a comedy club and go to Roll20 Tavern, where they do a live D&D show with you. It's kind of like a vehicle now. And I think
it's really interesting how that's evolved.
Yeah, especially 5e, because it's become really, I think a lot of people, I started in 2e. I'm a 2nd edition person, so you have THACO, and you had everyone, the psionicists that everyone hated because they didn't like the points and the math. But I think, isn't in the next year or two 6th edition coming out?
There's digital D&D, which is kind of a mind-blowing kind of experience and very much turns the tables literally on the world of D&D and how we think about playing. And then, of course, we're developing D&D Beyond, which is like their platform. As far as 6th edition, I imagine they're working on something like that, but I kind of also thought like maybe digital D&D is somehow connected to that, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't work at Wizards, so I don't really know.
Yeah, I think I remember someone talking about the timetable recently, and they're just like, 5th edition has been out for X amount of years.
I'd love to hear, just about this like multi-year, super involved campaign full of UXers. I didn't know that one.
How it started too.
Yeah.
How do you design for, like, can I encapsulate it in this like large questions? Like, how like, game as a product, how do you design a multi-year long narrative that holds up, that's still fun to return to every
it's full of all UXer players?
You are seriously critical.
I mean, so in the campaign that I'm currently running, I mean, it's definitely a multi-year campaign. We've had players come and go. There was kind of a batch at the beginning, and it really speaks true to several mistakes I've made in my career and clearly didn't learn from as a returning to being a DM since 2nd edition, which is set expectations early and often. So I had a group that I learned partway through, I mean, I'll say at the start of the campaign that it wasn't going to quite work out for everybody because they had different impressions of like how the game should go. And what it was is, and again, I'm not a huge advocate of like doing personas on every UX project, but like what it was is all these users, all these players had personas. Some of them wanted to get in the game and they just wanted to beat the heck out of stuff, hack and slash, just like throw me in a dungeon, give me a monster, I'm gonna attack it, I'm gonna totally do that.
Murder hobo.
Murder hobo. And then other players are more about the storyline, and that's more intriguing to them, and kind of untangling complexity in stories and stuff, and piecing things together like a giant puzzle. And then other players are more like, I'm going to do these kind of buffs and do this kind of stuff so that I could get, I'm going to use the action economy, and I'm going to, it's like the card counter in poker kind of thing for D&D, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Min-maxer. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a good strategy, and maybe that works, but like there's a point where like some of those players like don't have fun in a campaign where like, hey, this might have more of a narrative to it than that. We might have an entire session where we're not in combat at all, or multiple sessions in a row. And there are some gamers that just like, this is a D&D. I don't know what this thing is, and they just like throw in a towel, like they're out, right? It's like, okay, fine, fair enough. I understand that, and just like in business, like, there's a customer for every business, right? Every product, right? And if you tailor your product towards a particular audience, some of the other audience might suffer and they might eventually leave. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you're now able to focus on what the real true intent of the product was. I find a lot of companies now are just trying to, do everything for everybody. If I was that DM trying to play a game to satisfy all those different users, all those different players and their sort of persona, I would be at a loss. There would be winners and losers in every game, not in terms of like who died or TPK or whatever, but there'd just be a lot of like, folks that would not be happy with the game, and that's defeating the whole purpose, is having fun, right? So yeah, to answer your question about like, how do you create a world like this? How do you do a game that's multi-year? The sort of answer is I started this campaign in a certain way. I knew it was going to be narrative focused. I didn't set expectations. I lost some players through that process. These are all good people, well-meaning people, but that said, it wasn't a good fit. Got some new players that kind of joined in and kind of picked up the campaign from there. And that's where I was very clear about setting expectations. Like, hey, this is what's going to be, and here's what you could expect from some of these sessions. We also do these are like speed round sessions. They're not the like half day of playing D&D kind of thing. They're small, every other week kind of game sessions. So it does extend the storyline. And what I started with was essentially this like epic novel or a series of novels. They call it a series. Think of like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, all these, the books actually. That's what I had. I had these overarching, what are we trying to do? What's the end goal of this whole thing? The big arc, right? And
real time.
Yeah, and then inside of that are multiple arcs, right? And they all kind of intertwine in different ways, and they all connect. So we play essentially every other week, and then we kind of swap weeks when it's around holidays. I start at 7, we end up at 9. So not a whole lot of space, and it's a 6-player game. So there's lots of voices, or lots of folks contributing to the conversation in the room. And we don't really just focus on playing. Like, we might spend the first 30 minutes of our session just talking about design or late job hunts, like whatever random things are going on, just anything, nothing even related to D&D, just to kind of remember that, hey, this is kind of a social event, a bunch of friends getting together and playing and having fun, So yeah, it's a short, sort of thing, and we don't accomplish a whole lot. And there is a lot of like, the player wants to do this and they want to do that, especially like when they get to the city. It's like the sort of running joke is like, will we actually make it out of the bar today, or will we actually make it out of the magic shop today, kind of thing. Because all the negotiation with the shopkeep and all these different things and stuff, and it's all fun, and we just role play it out. It's like, if this is how we want to play our, spend our time, that's cool, let's do it.
How do people get in, or do you want people to get in contact with you? I don't know.
Stay away.
Yeah, no, I'm not the mysterious folk out there where it's like, hey, does anybody have this person's email? No, I readily share my contact stuff, probably a little too much, but Yeah, I run a business called Craft and Rigor. That is my coaching and mentoring business. If you're looking for a coach slash mentor, and I do combine both of those aspects into one offering, that's something that I do. If somebody is looking to get into the UX field or the design field, or become a product designer or a UX researcher, or content designer, that's stuff that I can help with. So the career coaching part of it, of what should my portfolio look like, what should my resume look like, help me finesse my resume so it's more desirable to a hiring manager, and mock interviews, and practicing presenting portfolios in an interview setting, virtual or in person. That's all stuff that I do through Craft and Rigor. And pairing it with the sort of mentorship of oh, I'm struggling with this aspect of design, how do I find a solution for this particular thing. But a lot of it tends to be folks that are like either trying to move up, having some challenge with like a PM or an engineer person. How do they work together better, how do I help them see the value in that. And then maybe they're looking for a lateral move, or going into management, or they're trying to move to another company. All that sort of stuff is folks that are my current clients, and I help with at a number of levels, whether they're new to the field, sort of mid-level, senior level, principal, or pretty far up and pretty experienced in the individual contributor sort of mindset, or in the management, new to management. That's like the one thing I feel like we lack a lot of in our industry is we sort of move people over from an IC track, a lateral move to management, but we give them almost, a lot of companies don't give any L&D to that space, and they're just like expected to just know how to manage, right? And not everybody's good at it, right? So there's a lot of things that I give advice and suggestions on about how to structure that, how to do that effectively inside of an organization. So I also advise businesses on how to build a design team, how to grow a design team, thinking about, how do you implement a design process? How do you build a design system? How do you build a design ops team? Where should it live? Who should it report into? How many levels should there be? All this kind of stuff is also part of what I do as Craft and Rigor on an advisory level for businesses. But the main bulk and bread and butter of it is, people looking for coaching and mentoring, especially in this economy where like the job hunt is excruciatingly painful,
Brutal.
Even for the most talented, well-positioned, greatest portfolio ever people. So there's a lot of folks out there that need that kind of support. I'm one of many that do this sort of stuff. I think my niche is specifically that I've been in the field of UX, so I could give kind of customized coaching around the UX field, where most like career coaches and executive coaches don't necessarily have that background. Some of them do, and I'm happy to refer people on who want that kind of coaching. But for those that are looking for the design background paired with coaching, that's my thing. So Craft and Rigor, you can just go and find me on Twitter at NickF. And I'm on several Slack channels. I'm probably on your Slack channel out there. So just a bit of a lurker pretty much on Slack, but just find me on LinkedIn if you need to, or go to my website, nickfinck.com. You could find a way to contact me there. I don't publicly share my email, but fill out the form, send me a message, I'll get it, and we could go from there. It's one of those things where like sometimes just the right advice at the right time. And I know there's like in the field of UX, advice is cheap. I mean, anybody and everybody, like you go on Twitter and get 1,000 different answers to the same question. It's not hard. You could heck use ChatGPT to get a response to something. The thing is you have to understand where it's coming from, right? So I find a lot of, like, for example, my entry-level designers that are my clients now, had got advice from people who've only hired senior designers that only are used to, working with senior designers. And then they kind of get this daunting task of creating a portfolio of like 8+ case studies or something, and can't be on Squarespace and all these things. And it's like, I think they're speaking of a senior designer. Maybe that person hasn't been calibrated for somebody entering the field. It's perfectly acceptable to have a portfolio on Squarespace if you're new to the field. Going back to my earlier statement of like, don't let somebody tell you how to do, what you need to do for your job, kind of carve your own path. I think it's important to make sure that the advice you're seeking, and more importantly, who you're asking for advice from, is somebody that has done what you're trying to do, has been down that road and has a lot of expertise to provide in that space. Because so often it's very easy to just, get misled. And then you find yourself like 3 months down the road, still without that first job, wondering why you're not breaking into that field. And it's painful, right?
I am a huge advocate of mentorship. I tell everyone to do it. I'm glad that this is a service that you offer. I have mentorship in a couple different mentors, like over the years from working in UX. And so, yes, the source is very important where you're getting the mentorship from. So,
Yep.
The Thief is a Dungeons & Dragons actual play with just one player, Cece Way.
Getting more information, I think, is pretty safe, and I can't let Osmond rot.
And a full cast of NPCs, supported with soundscapes.
This isn't some pickpocket or killer or slumlord. These are important people. These are the kinds of people who, if they get your name, you cannot evade.
The original world is grim, and it is unlikely the thief will survive. Created by Michael Schofield.
Listen for The Thief, an audio drama, anywhere you find podcasts and on the web at thiefpodcast.com.
We have a series of 12 questions, right?
Inside the actor studio, right? That's how you would describe it?
Inside the actor studio. They're kind of random. The way you respond is however you want, just off the top of your head. You can elaborate or not, and we'll just kind of like move on. And this is how we'll kind of like end the session.
Tell us what your D12 is, and that's where you can start.
Yeah, tell us the number.
All right, I'm gonna roll. I got a 2. I didn't do too hot.
Theater of the mind or maps and miniatures?
Oh gosh, it's a balance. It depends. I'm gonna give you a UX answer. Oh gosh. Yeah. I mean that's it's like a holy war in some cases, like if you follow some of the forums. But I really think I do better with theater of the mind than I do with maps. Because usually, like, I think of maps as like the combat, and if I'm playing like more of a story-driven kind of experience, it's going to be more narrative, right? So, all
right, roll the next die.
All right, I got a 7.
If you could make up any UX title to give yourself, what would it be?
Oh boy, Director of the Forest of Trees. I read that once in a Fast Company book, and I thought, you know what?
Oh, I love it.
I'm going to go with that. 1, because I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and 2, just because it's kind of like see the bigger picture, but also see the parts, So
100%. I'm a little shook how fast that just came off the top of your head. It's like, that's just like, oh, I've thought about this. Give us another.
Got a 1.
Ooh, favorite design tool.
Oh, immediately fail. So my favorite design tool, gosh. Yeah, I mean, I love Figma. I love Sketch. I've used Axure. I've kind of used everything. OmniGraffle was great for wireframing the heck out of stuff. Yeah, that's a tough one.
OmniGraffle was great.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
Great. Somewhere out there's a video of me explaining how my team does OmniGraffle on the Omni site. I actually redesigned that site a long time ago.
Oh, no way.
Omni company, OmniCorp. Yeah. So I'm gonna say I would say Figma not because I'm just like, let's go with the latest trend. Let's, whatever. I know it's now an Adobe product and things could change, but the community aspect of Figma was kind of revolutionary. The multi, participant aspect of it, I hadn't seen that since, sub-ETHA edit days. I mean, and where you can, one person is writing code, another person is filling out the content in between the code, that's what I see. Like, the benefit of Figma is just bringing the community together in a lot of different ways. I think it's one step. I think there's going to be an evolution. Maybe it's going to be Figma. Maybe it's going to be something else that's going to take us even closer as a community. Because right now we have all these tools outside of that, like Twitter used to be the design center for the world, not so much maybe anymore, but that's where the conversation would happen. So I think that's important to bring that aspect in, because design has many different, we'll use pace layering here. Well, it has many different layers that move at different speeds. There's sort of the fashion of it. Like, what's the cool design trend for this year, isn't the next trend for next year, right? What is, the right kind of tool for this year might be different next year too. But for right now, I think Figma is it, because it gets the award for bringing community together.
All right. So roll again.
That was a failed roll there. Okay. 3.
What game should everyone play at least one time?
Oh, gosh. So my friends Kelly and Ras are avid game players, like tabletop, type games. I'm gonna say, and this is just because it was a fun, ridiculous experience, but Trailer Park Wars. So it's this ridiculous game where you have trailers and everybody has a character, and there's all the personas of the different kinds of folks you might see in that kind of space, and how they interact with each other, and how they deflect or absorb, sort of and pair up well with other neighbors and such. I'm totally doing the game a disservice. It is a roller coaster of a wild ride, just to hey, we're going to do this tonight, and go down to your favorite game shop, see if they have it, set it up, read the rules,
awesome,
and then just play it however you're going to play it, because man, it is so fun.
Awesome. Yeah, we're totally going to plug the heck out of that.
All right. I'm going to roll here, and I got a 12. Nice.
Ooh. Oh my God, this is deep, Tim. You fail your last death save. What are your final words?
Oh man. I'm going to make a little bit of mockery of myself here and use the catchphrase that one of my characters in the not the 5-year campaign, but a different campaign that my friend Ras ran a while back. And the character was a warlord, so very courageous, very, strategic and all this. And upon encountering, I think it was a troll or something, like a cave troll or something, I don't remember exactly what it was. And later became a character flaw, as a feared creature, because his words were, as all the other characters are running across the field to go and attack this thing, he's retreat.
I love it.
Yeah. So maybe my last famous words will be retreat.
Let's keep going. Yeah.
I got a 3. So
what is your color mode? RGB, RYB, Pantone, CMYK.
Oh.
Which one speaks to you?
Well, I definitely want to throw in the alpha layer on there for anything I play with.
Yes, that's what I told Tim. It's like RGBA.
Yeah, that's what he does.
Yeah, so it is a bit of the RGB, and also RGB because like throwback to my digital video world, and going from cinematography CMYK and print. There's a number of different, like hue, lumency, and all this kind of stuff. So I think RGBA, and gosh, I feel like I have to pop open my CSS to see what the heck I actually used on my own personal website now. But yeah, hand coded that thing, so I'm like, I should know this. But yeah, I think it's RGB.
There's another wheel. Let's see where your adventure takes you.
5.
When you attack, do you use strength or dexterity?
Oh, yeah. Am I more like brute force, or am it's like, what is it, judo, right? There's kind of an interestingness to that. A lot of characters I've played have been fighters, so there's definitely a strength aspect, but I think I like to use the dexterity and be able to kind of manipulate the weight of the other person in the attack in a way that favors what needs to happen. So I'm not necessarily manipulating people, but more or less using their strength, their weight, their attack as a benefit for how we're going to make this happen.
I have to ask: do you do judo or BKK?
I know a little bit of judo, but I don't think I would say I do judo.
Okay.
Judo, yeah.
I do judo. That's why I was like, I love it. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Roll again.
Tim immediately perked up. He's like, oh, judo?
Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, I might have misrepresented that.
No, I think that was great. That was a really good description of judo. So,
I got another 1, so I'm totally rolling the snake eyes here.
Like you have advantage. Roll again.
Okay. All right. So this time I got a 10. So let's go with the 10.
A 10. Oh, Nick, I hope you're. I literally know you're sitting down. I hope you're sitting down more. What is your visceral reaction when you hear UI/UX?
Cringe. Absolutely cringe. And not because I don't value UI, but I firmly believe UI.
You can tell the truth.
UI is part of the user experience. It is connected inherently. This goes back to form follows function. It's form ever follows function, if we want to go into the architectural aspect of it. But I feel like UI is always going to be part of the experience, whether it's digital or physical or anything. There's always some part that the individual is interfacing with, even if they're not touching it, right? So I feel like when we say that, either we're really trying to say, hey, we want a UX professional that is really good at UI, which they could just say in the bullet points, or they really have no idea what they're trying to hire. And a lot of times those roles, you find out, like I had somebody I talked to yesterday, and I said, you know what, this company really needs to just hire a UI designer. They don't need a UX designer for this role. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, they need aesthetic. Everything else is figured out, and it's very seamless. There's not friction, you really just need a nice aesthetic to map across this product. It's like, that's a UI designer. That will help in that space.
Great answer. May the world see its failures.
All right.
Let's end again.
I got a 5. Do I get advantage or do I use my proficiency bonus?
+3 proficiency.
All right.
What is your dump stat?
What is my dump stat? Oh, gosh. I mean, it depends on the character, but if I had to pick and I've had a lot of fun with this, actually intelligence, unless I'm playing, of course, like, a character that is required. So
I love it.
Yeah, because just it's actually really fun to play somebody who's kind of stupid as a character and just run around and doing these kind of ridiculous things because, like, and the party's going, why are you doing that? And have some purpose within the party, right? So yeah.
There's some probably like therapy like laid in there. It's like, you spend every day being the thinker. Why don't you just turn that off?
Less thinking, more doing. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. I scored another one. Man, I'm glad I'm rolling this on
advantage.
Yeah. Get what? Advantage?
Roll again. Yeah.
All right. 2.
A 2?
Yeah.
Plus 4. Yeah.
Thanks.
Here, I'll just go. What's a game that is a really guilty pleasure?
A really guilty pleasure. I mean, some people have different degrees about what they feel is a guilty pleasure. But I'm going to go with Cards Against Humanity. I feel like it's one of those things where, like, awkwardly, I find some sort of delight in being able to play that, like perhaps with my parents even sometimes, and the awkwardness that can happen in that game. Absolute awkwardness. Not that I thrive on that, but like, just a new person who's never played it before, they always, you always kind of get them into the mix and try to set expectations that pretty much you're going to walk away with from this game offended. And if you're not offended, you probably haven't played it well, So.
Yeah. That's a good answer.
All right. I got a 9.
Describe your favorite die. Die and dice. Like,
dice?
Okay, we know that die is singular, but come on. Describe your favorite dice.
Well, I mean, I've had the liberty of handling a lot of dice in my time, and also like my players. One of the holiday gifts I was able to get them previous year was a set of dice in a nice case and all that kind of stuff. And
Awesome. A connoisseur.
They were all different. Like there was like I had the metal dice. There was the kind that was like super, like the 4-sided dice was like literally could be used as a weapon. It was sharp. So I, and I actually, understand the value and like, okay, why do you want to have rounded corners on the dice? Just like, why do you want to have rounded corners in your designs, right?
Why do you want rounded corners on your dice?
Because one, the roll, it's a little bit smoother. And then also like if you tend to be like me and kind of fidget with your dice, it's a lot better experience than that super sharp cut dice that's like going to stab your hand and you're like, ow, in the middle of gameplay.
I legit never thought about that at all.
Yeah.
Same thing for border radius. Border radius 10 pixel. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing.
Right. Yeah, and the metal dice, like there's some value in it. Like they're very beautiful. I've seen some of these dice up close, and some of them are really well crafted. But man, they are so heavy. And when you roll it, like there's very little like spin on it, so it's like if it lands, it's gonna land and it's gonna stay put, like, right. So I tend
to roll. Most like shop talk about dice. This is amazing. I've never really thought about that, but you're right. You have a preference. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like,
so the ones I'm playing with right now are kind of a combination. They're purple and green. It's really hard to kind of see it here. Sort of mostly transparent. Wow. And again, the numbers here actually matter too. Another thing in terms of accessibility and contrast ratio, the number of dice that I've seen that actually either don't paint their numbers or they paint the opposite you would think, like it's a black color but the dice is dark. It's like really hard to see, Same thing goes with like I have another set of dice up in my cabinet over here that is a metal that has they're themed after character classes. And so it was like the Ranger class and had like oak leaves and things like that on it. Very intricate, but almost impossible to read the number when you're rolling. And so you're sitting there staring at it going, I think that's I think that's a 5, or it could be a 7, but I'm not sure, because all the flourishes around it. So same thing with design. It's like a lot of flourish, right? So I tend to go with actually a pretty vanilla, very readable, easy to roll, lightweight dice like this.
Final question is my favorite one to say. I love it. It came out this way.
Yeah.
What is your D&D alignment?
Oh, gosh. So I'm going to have to go back to the toilet paper model of alignment, of how you hang toilet paper on the roll kind of thing, which is great. We'll have to link to that in the show notes. But I tend to be somewhere in the neutral to chaotic good side of things. Like, I love helping people, and sometimes I'm a little bit crazy about how I go about helping people. So wanting to do good in the world, wanting to help our users use systems, wanting to help people get into the field, wanting to help elevate designers so they get that promotion and get to where they want to go. So definitely on the good side, and I would say neutral, because I could play like by the rules, or I could go a little bit off the rules at times.
So you're saying neutral good then, or neutral or chaotic good?
So I actually would say yeah, you're right. It's on the chaotic good spectrum. Yeah.
Get ready for the game that's hot. D12's what you've got. 12 questions gotta be quick. Can you handle it? Can you stick? D12, D12, roll the dice, answer well. D12, D12, will you triumph?
This season, we really promise Design Thinking Games is going to be more active on various social media. We understand, as aged Gen Xers / millennials, elder millennials, that
Wait. I'm firmly rooted in Zennial. I am a Zennial. So I am right between Gen X and Millennial.
Okay. As a Zennial and a Millennial elder, we are we acknowledge that, look, like, our social media game for the last 2 seasons hasn't been on point, but this season you're missing out if you're not following Design Thinking Games on the 3 T's: TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter. Probably in that order, as Twitter is a dumpster fire. Well, on TikTok, you can actually see Ben shooting some excellent, footage of some of the really cool and interesting games we're playing. As you know, we look at games clinically and deconstruct them to the point of no longer being enjoyable, but that makes for some really good footage. The other thing you'll find there are this kind of network of amazing indie designers who we are interviewing, some of whom, or we're interviewing on this show for the season, and we're all going to be engaging there. We'd love for it. If you're into user experience, if you're into the player experience, if you're into the craft of game design, if you're into us, Design Thinking Games.
Previously on Design Thinking LARPing.
Welcome to the Design Thinking Games Conference.
I am Rapid Protocol. How may I help Prototype?
This is really fascinating, but what does it actually do?
What about LARPs? You know, a live-action roleplay? Can your robot help us play test these?
You know, LARPs aren't real.
That is what you think, Design Thinking Games. That is what you only wish were true.
Design Thinking LARPing is a story about heroism. The script is written by a poorly trained AI, and it is performed by your poorly trained heroes. Enjoy.
What's happening?
I don't know.
I can't see anything in the chaos.
I can't believe it. They're real. They're dressed as elves, vampires, orcs, and fairies. Look, that one is dressed like us.
That's not for you.
Get over here, you little frustrating, stupid robot. You're coming with us.
I can protect us.
You wish. Take that.
Tim, are you okay? It's me, the guy who asked the destroy question from the first installment.
Did you throw a hacky sack at me?
Oh, good. You're alive.
Quit struggling.
You'll destroy it.
You're gonna fix LARPing.
Nothing can make LARPs playable.
The doors are sealed. There is no way out. We are in control now, and we have rapid protobot. The time is finally ours for a new utopia. Say goodbye to design thinking games.
Find out in the next episode of Design Thinking Games the fate of our heroes, Tim, Michael, and, of course, Rapid Protobot, the most delightful of the three. This story continues.
Thank you for listening and connecting with Design Thinking Games on TikTok, Twitch, and Twitter. You can also check out designthinkinggames.com to request topics, ask questions, or see what else is going on. Until next time, game on. Any final thoughts for our listeners, Rapid Protobot?
Destroy.